Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate you giving us your time because this is going to be a beautiful experience that we're going to have together, and I'm glad we get to have it together. Welcome to this Margins Meets event. My name is Susie Q. Smith, and I work with The Word, a nonprofit organization working to build a publishing community that will fight for inclusivity. Our mission is to promote voices from underserved communities and diverse backgrounds, to honor the stories of those who have faced adversity and injustice, and to provide a sanctuary space where these groups will see themselves in literature. My role with the Word is to direct the biannual Margins Conference. Launched in 2020, Margins was created by and for people on the margins, promoting the inclusive representation of experiences in literature for communities who have historically been excluded. So it's a biannual conference, book fair, and literary festival. And this is one of our on years. So it's happening in Denver, August 5th to the 7th, and also online. So there are a number of ways to get into Margins. You can check it out at our website, www.thewordfordiversity.org/margins. Margins brings together writers, storytellers, and wordsmiths at all levels of experience to talk about the many approaches to storytelling, visioning, creating, as well as education, inclusion, advocacy, organizing, and perhaps the most important piece of it is building community. So we are going to be doing that together. Tonight, you're going to get a little taste of some artists that I really, really deeply enjoy, and I'm so grateful that we get to have them with us tonight. So our poets this evening will be Ariana Brown and Roya Marsh. Each of our guests will offer a reading of their work, and then we will have a chance to talk about it. So I'll ask some questions. Audience, you'll ask some questions in the comments, and we're going to have a wonderful time together. We're going to be talking about writing. We're going to talk about poems. We're going to talk about life, connection, community, hearts, grief, all the things that come up. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go, and I will get to them as many as I can. So tonight, we're going to hear first from Ariana Brown. Ariana Brown is a queer Black Mexican American poet from the south side of San Antonio, Texas, now based in Houston, Texas. She is the author of poetry collections We Are Owed, period, and Sana Sana. I'll put links to both of those in the chat. Ariana's work investigates queer Black personhood in Mexican American spaces, Black relationality and girlhood, loneliness, and care. Her debut poetry EP, Let Us Be Enough, is available on Bandcamp. She holds a BA in African Diaspora Studies and Mexican American Studies from UT Austin and an MFA in poetry from the University of Pittsburgh, and is pursuing an MLS in Library and Information Science from the University of North Texas. Ariana is a 2014 National Collegiate Poetry Slam champion and owes much of her practice to Black performance communities led by Black women poets from the South. She has been writing, performing, and teaching poetry for over 10 years. You can follow Ariana on Twitter and Instagram at Ariana the Poet. Without further chat for me, please welcome Ariana the Poet.
Thank you so much, Susie. I'm super excited to be here. I'm going to be reading poems from We Are Owed, which is my debut full-length poetry collection. So I'm going to start us off with the first poem, which is called At the End of the Borderlands. We need new origins. Countries are killing everyone I love. From my cousin's lips, a wish for my safety. From my curandera's hands, rituals for healing. I simmered rosemary and drank its tea, grew my hair thick as a plague, spoke poems till my throat blistered and waned and still could not curse colonizers enough to undo their work. No one I know has enough money to live, yet asks if I've eaten. Before days end, we feed each other our blackness, grow full from offering, our many tongues, studies, compassion, our wilderness and names. We run the length of country, redditing our feet, come to our own ends to face ourselves. What will we leave in our wake? Who we are now is our responsibility. Our empty pockets, our humility or shame. Culture alone will not save us. Who are you without your country? What would you give? Would you fight for those you don't love, to whom you are indebted? This next poem is called A Quick Story. My mother says, "Your dad and I were great friends. My father, dead, sits by the sea, conjured by Otis Redding and my mother's voice. Wilbert Tyrone Brown III wound up next to my mama in Air Force basic training. Said he was from an island. Nobody's fool. My mama rolled her eyes and said, Galveston ain't no island." Before emancipation was proclaimed in Galveston, conquistadores washed up on the beaches, shipwrecked, and called it theirs. Now there's a Michoacana on the corner, paved roads sinking to the sea. You could live thousands of years swaying by the water. My father's best friend says, even on the day of the accident, he and I had been together that day, the Monday following the holiday. He went and paid every bill that he had that day. Right before he left, he came back and he flipped his keys to me. "Here, old man, take these back." It was his truck keys, because the next day we were going to paint it. He had told everyone that your mom and he were going to get married. Best friend ever. How do you mourn the loss of life, both foreign and domestic? Witnesses said the accident lit up the sky, 2 planes colliding in the air, killing everyone on board. National news, flags at half-mast. Remove the recruitment offices across the street from high schools. Yes, they signed up for this, prayed to a flag, and were buried with one. 7 crew members were on one plane and 6 on the other. Dream of the end of nations, a world without borders to enforce. Countries will kill everyone you love, and everyone else too, foreign and domestic. In this book, I'm really interested in thinking through our relationships to nations, and for people of color who have heritage countries that are outside of the US, I'm interested in our relationships to those as well. And so one of the things I do in this book is try to excavate some of the histories of enslaved Africans in Mexico, which is one of my heritage countries. One of those people is named Gaspar Yanga, and he actually founded the first free African settlement in the Americas in Veracruz, Mexico. As far as I know, there are no surviving images of what Yanga looks like. So this poem is called Why I Want to Know What Yanga Looked Like. If I had a photograph of Yanga, if one arrived in the mail from a friendly but weary postman, in a long, thick envelope sealed with spit that was spat between the gap in 2 clean teeth, because I think of Yanga as having a gap between his teeth. Not sure why, just seems like it makes sense. Not a humongous gap, but a small one. A thin space between 2 yellow bones at the front of his mouth. The crack in a bell that makes the song sweeter. And when I speak about songs, I am always speaking about freedom. A gap like that, where everything goes black for a minute, and then the lights come on. And somehow, what you are seeing is more beautiful because of the interruption, because the interruption becomes part of the thing itself. And suddenly, you can't imagine the 2 teeth, wide and high at the top of the mouth like sails, having ever existed without a dark spell in between them. Marker of an absence, skinny black pillar, little room holding everything I have lost since Yanga's escape, since the sieges on land and by foot, the open door to 4 centuries of running and a fistful of secret languages I only speak in my dreams. If I looked at the photograph of Yanga and found all that, a litany of things thieved from my contemporary memory, and Yanga had sealed the envelope with spit and a lick of aloe vera, then I'd frame the photograph and hang it in the center of my home. So every time I left, before locking the door, I'd check for Yanga, grinning at me with a gaze 4 centuries long, black streak in his smile, the 2 large teeth shining like sugar. I have a series of poems in the book about Yanga, and this is the last one that comes. It's a letter to him. Yanga, did you really agree to turn in runaways in exchange for freedom? your people's freedom. Were you a patriarch? I have no room to judge, no experience to understand yours exactly. I still love you. I just want to know. Did you have children? A wife? A husband? A gender? Or a few? In my knowledge of you, what has been imposed, invented? Yanga, I have been thinking about birth. Who was your mother? How many people loved and raised you? What did you call yourself? Was it you that birthed the people, or your wife? Were you a man, or something freer? I have been thinking about birth as the place we begin, but I want to begin with you. I think I do. What language did you speak, and who taught it to you? Did you like chocolate with hot peppers, like Inset Duncan said? Or the way loving someone means you will always remember them, even if you forget their face? Teach me to be a person without a nation on the other side of enslavement. I will write to you always. Someone we cannot picture is writing to us now, asking for assistance. They are on the brink of an escape, and neither you nor I could see. They are ours, in the way we are each other's, in the way you were your people's, and they are bringing all of us with them into the forever universe where we are always free. I stopped saying I could never have imagined, because when I met you, it stopped being true. Okay. This poem is called Borderland Suite North. I am missing my father's voice. I cannot conjure everything. I love Yanga so much, I want to bring him everywhere, especially Texas, my home, Lone Star that shone from my mother's kin and bathes my daddy in sky. Come with me, I say, but don't want to feel like I'm asking too much of him. My freedom figures, dark saviors with features that blur and dissolve, threaten to fade. What good is memory without facts? In this century, an app shaped like a compass tells me which direction I must face to pray. I ask herbs for assistance. I am not alone. There are things I know are unknowable, things I would give up my hair, my God, my own feet to know. Praying is not like wishing. You must have something to offer. Inhale, the ceremony. I take the hurtful poem to the reading, the one about Cortez, or death, or how I'm running out of language and there's so much left in the story to tell. And the room opens its skin to its bleeding heart, and I reach in, coaxing the flood. Someone else is reading, and the walls shimmer with my kin. They burst from the room's skirts, heads pooling at the surface, climb in rivers down the walls. I can't say their names, so I inhale. And everyone is here, swirling tulips splashing at my feet, bearing sweet giggles and fresh bread, blades in their cheeks, weather for names. The room bends its crooked finger, pulls me close. The elders brought rosemary and know everything I am going to say. I fall into liquid, make wet every word, and nothing is lost. Nothing was ever lost. There was never any magic. There was never this body or its wound. There was only water and the stories we passed through it. Okay. Introductions. I'm Ariana, and I've been conquered. Child of Mexico, Africa, USA. I have someone else's name. I was born in a cemetery. In 1848, Frederick Douglass wrote an article condemning the US conquest of Mexico. I went to the Alamo on a field trip once. My uncle's dream is to own land. His Facebook photo is him atop a horse. This is not a joke. A boarder blew through me, hooked my great grandmother's tooth, dragged the bones of Laredo south across the river. My great grandmother's hometown is built on the bones of her ancestors. Pride is a strange violence. My great grandmother's country had a black president in 1829, last name Guerrero, meaning warlike, soldier. My father was in the Air Force. He died flying. Try to tell me the wind don't speak. My father died before I was born. I talk to everyone's ancestors. I'm a cotton twirler, shapeshifter, grave digger. My curandera says the earth can transform anything. I be burying shit all the time. Okay, I think this is going to be my last poem. And this is about a trip I took to Mexico City a few years ago. A division of gods. While visiting Templo Mayor in Mexico City, I reckon, walking the same land Cortez did, walked, tried to own. In the shadow of his cathedral, I shudder. Templo Mayor is now a museum. Are there records of Black people visiting plantations and crying? No history is interchangeable. I am grasping. Templo Mayor is open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. today. What makes people want to tour the end of something? Archaeologists had to break the temple walls in order to learn more about them, fracturing further violence. Across from the cathedral, someone sells Aztec designs on t-shirts. No mention of genocide, spiritual or otherwise. So everyone runs their fingers along the tourist attraction. The cathedral's holier house waits its turn to sink, and my classmate remarks on the tour guide's good English. I enter the cathedral, so I cannot be afraid of it, but only after returning to the temple. And I do not touch the stones, each volcanic rock carried by hand to the construction, each stone split by European hand and thrust into the cathedral. I don't know if you understand the birth of nations. Everything old is made to look new or gone. Thank you.
I'm going to need some more time to gather my whole face and so. And I already knew I was coming here to cry. So we're wow. That was stunning, stunning work. I just want to ask one question before I let you hang out backstage. So is everything you shared tonight from We Are Owed?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
everything is from this
Okay,
book.
so one more time. Just show it to the people. And the link is in the chat, y'all. So get your copy of We Are Owed. And then let's start a book club about it. So we can talk about it. We can cry together. We can do all the things. And right now, I'm excited to introduce our next author. And then we're all going to be in conversation together. And I can't wait to hear these poems from Roya Marsh. Bronx, New York native Roya Marsh is a nationally recognized poet, performer, educator, and activist. She is the author of Daylight and works feverishly towards LGBTQIA plus justice and dismantling white supremacy. Roya is the co-founder of the Bronx Poet Laureate Initiative, a PEN America Emerging Voices mentor, 2021 faculty with Lambda Literary's Writers Retreat for Emerging LGBTQ Voices, and the awardee of the 2021 Lotus Foundation Prize for Poetry. So that's just a small touch. There's more to this. This is Roya's short bio. Roya's work has been featured in numerous places, including the Academy of American Poets, Poetry Magazine, The Village Voice, Nylon Magazine, Huffington Post, The Root, Button Poetry, Carnegie Hall, the Apollo Theater, Lexis Verses and Flows, NBC, BET, and the Breakbeat Poets Volume 2, Black Girl Magic from Haymarket. You can find out more and help to support Black futures at blackjoy.com, BLKJOY.com. And without further ado, please welcome Roya Marsh.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to read some pieces from my debut collection of poems, Daylight, and I'll be reading some newer pieces as well. This first piece is entitled, In Broad Daylight, Black Women Look Grouchy, and it includes an excerpt from an essay by Audre Lorde. For within living structures defined by profit, by power, by institutional dehumanization, our feelings were never meant to survive. Kept around as unavoidable adjuncts or pleasant pastimes, feelings were meant to kneel to thought as women were expected to kneel to men. But women have survived as poets, and there are no new pains. We have felt them all already. We have hidden that fact in the same place where we have hidden our power. They surface in our dreams, and it is our dreams that point the way to freedom. Those dreams are made realizable through our poems that give us strength and courage to see, to feel, to speak, and to dare. Audre Lorde. I tell myself to shut up before I ever utter a word, before a man inevitably does. Before a lover tells me I'm ruining a moment, I say, shut up, woman. Just write it down in a text, in a tweet, in a poem, something easily digestible to be liked, shared. Make them think you didn't think, but just wrote the thing you didn't have no business thinking or saying in the first place. I have been invited to perform more than I have been invited to speak. They want the art, not the woman behind it. Want the metaphor, not the matriarch. I feel like the world feels like I feel like the angry Black woman. My senses tell me to fight. They always have. My senses tell me that physical violence is the only mode of protection that has served me. The world tells me this is wrong. I tell my students this is wrong. I want them to believe it. I want me to believe it. In response to this, I study, I write, I share with the audacity to exist, to speak, to progress. And the men applaud, and the lovers swoon. My feminism is visible. It's big-breasted, often discounted and ignored, always wearing shades or throwing it. It's got bottom grills and 3 master's degrees. My feminism is Tiana Taylor in that Kanye video, dressed like Queen Latifah and set it off. Ain't woman enough for the straight ones. Ain't man enough for the gay ones. It sags sometimes if I don't wear a belt. It's hard, but ain't bulletproof. Is proof of the bullet. My feminism is Jesus, the real one, the Black one, with locks on the cross, know the Ankh, crucified yet broken free, cupping the world on its bare shoulders, can carry a baby but ain't too sure about pushing it out. My feminism is mother, is a mother effer, wishes a mother effer would, might smile at you but not for you, would grab Trump by his pussy even though he's all asshole. My feminism gets catcalled and called dog by women and men who hate how masculine my feminism is, and it don't make women loyal, don't make them stable or stay. My feminism gets cheated on and called too feminine for having feelings about it. My feminism is exhausted of your expectations and being judged and being denied and explaining its own femininity. So I do a lot of talking with the participants of my workshops, whether they're my middle school students or in some of my adult workshops. And I always ask them, to toss me prompts. What sort of aspects of my life are they interested in so that I can also be engaged in these conversations that we're having from a writer standpoint and not just a facilitator standpoint. So the next poem that I am about to read is from a prompt that I was given by my students. It is an epitaph piece, and the title of the poem is a quote. The quote is, "Leave that anxiety shit in the crib and just come." So I took it off. I hung it up right next to my keys and debilitating depression. I picked up that fitted hat that she said I looked good in once, and I sat my dysphoria on the dresser because tonight's not about that. I spent 2 hours between the closet and the mirror picking my fit and my face. I think red's our color. Okay, smooth. I won't drink tonight. Unless someone points out that I am not drinking and now I'm smacked and longing for the bed I never wanted to leave in the first place. And she, 7 Douce and lemonades deep into a pool of, yo, you good? And hell nah, I'm not. But I nod and smile with what's left of my paper mache party face. And damn, I've been here 2 hours and she ain't even compliment this fit that I tried so hard to look slim in. So now I'm thinking she don't even think I'm cute because I ain't been college weight since college, and the bouncer spent a little extra time with my ID because the real me got a couple more chins than that frail fraud in the photo, and they was gonna frisk me until they happened upon these big old titties, and I keep doing my femme voice that we all hate because I want to avoid hearing them call me sir or bro or the awkward stares smothering me as I take up space in the line for the women's restroom, and I am 3 bodies away from the door but still throw in the towel because I could just pee at my own house where the floors are dry and my cheeks can touch the seat without fear. I rejoin the group and catch wind of everyone's cognac colored corneas and shit. This is the perfect time to call my Uber and dip. But will she be mad that I ain't invite her? And do I risk making it awkward, asking her plans if she ain't even checking for me like that? So I settle for a hey, I'm a cut. And she hits me with a dead ass, and my ride share is round in the corner, so I can't do the back and forth or he'll leave and I'll have to fight for my $5 cancellation fee. And yo, you ain't even give me no play all night turns into damn, I really thought we was gonna leave together, but she ain't making no real moves and my bladder doing capoeira, so I gotta go chase the Toyota Highlander and pray the Kegel rumor from 7th grade is true. So I'm outside, I'm looking for Raul, and the bouncer wishes me a good night before asking me to text when I'm home safe. And I want to ignore him because he don't even know me like that. But we get killed for shit like that, so I nod and smile with what's left of my paper mache party face. I check the plates and jump in the back seat. I take my hat off, wipe the sweat from my brow, and damn, my anxiety was dripping from my head top this entire time. So the next piece that I am going to read has recently been published in a couple of places, and it's definitely and unfortunately super relevant. I just want to, give a sort of content advisory for Black Death, which is something that is running rampant, and also Black Rage. This is, my response, my conversation with myself about how I'm surviving all of this, basically. It is the night after the election, and I don't smile. I lie, awake, wondering what kind of ancestor I will be. I, the child of a hard father that only wanted soft daughters, learned to make a perfect fist on my own. Learned to swing by watching, by feeling. I bark like the dogs do, loud, and in the face of danger, gnash my teeth and secure all things vital. I learned to fight before I learned to speak. My hands grew into grenades. I learned I hold the pen tight. Learned to explode only when necessary. Learned, though I am always at war, not every room is a battlefield. I shout Black joy across the world. And folks who smiles the smell of green bean casserole praise me for not being angry. The definition of angry is having a strong feeling of or showing annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. I've been angry, My fists have painted holes into walls. I was 14 the first time I stomped a man's face into mashed potatoes. I used to pray to a God who would not call home, a black butch with a slick tongue and a hunger for freedom. I am the kind of sorry no one teaches us to forgive. I say black joy, they hear shuck and jive, think me palatable, the good black. Well, nah, this ain't what enlightenment looks like. I got a backpack full of screw ups and screw yous. See, there came a point where tears were no longer able to cleanse, and there are still days that I want out. But I am no better if I only save myself. And right now, there are people lining the floors of arenas to hear me tell them losing is at capacity. Guess we going to win. Someone gave me a pen and I wrote a spine into a sack of skin. Imagine me not being angry, explaining to white folks that anti-racist work ain't hashtagging or posting a black box not fit enough to hold my last breath or raising me up by their white guilt straps. Anti-racism work means you are willing to die for my kind of black that wrote the country that you wrote us out of. What good is writing poems to my unborn when I have nieces and nephews? They are shutting down one prison to build 4 and have a bunk with our last name on it. They are waiting for us to forget that we are chosen. And yes, while I am God's daughter, my godson's father is locked in a cage. So no, I don't write poems and metaphors about caskets or burials. It's just another way for the world to hold us hostage. Tell the dead I am still here. Tell the here I am still fighting. I live and learn to walk on the seas beneath and between us. The ship is sinking, but I'm teaching us to swim, to wade in the war zone where our joy endangers us, buying groceries, playing video games, enjoying ice cream in bed, in a backyard, in a parking lot, on a wine train. The men in my family are still breathing, and that is not a crime. The women in my family are still breathing, and that is not a crime. So I say we gonna make it. Someday we'll all be free. Be real black for me, all right? And it sounds like I'm talking to God on repeat. I was born black and woman and American. Bitterness beckons, inspired by my mere existence, born, waiting for this land of the free to bust a capitalist in my head. And you think me being angry is the problem. I say black joy, and I mean I forgive my father. I mean F the police. I mean dismantle white supremacy. I mean I was zip tied one night, kettled on the Manhattan Bridge the next, and still live to teach your kids in the morning. I am everything America threatens to break, and the threat, and America, and the break itself. What I'm saying is no, I'm not angry. I'm coming. I say black joy, and I mean, who are you when I start taking what I am owed? This is going to be my last piece. We've been hurt, been down before. When our pride was low, looking at the world like, where do we go? And we hate po-po. They want to kill us dead in the streets for show. I'm at the preacher's door. My knees get weak and my gun might blow, but we gonna be all right. My name is Roya Marsh, and I am a black poet who will not remain silent while this nation continues to murder black people. I have a right to be angry. I have a right to be joyful. And black joy is real. It's native. It's not white. Was here before that. Before God said, let there be light so y'all could witness a glimpse of what you've been missing. Black is not a color, but absorbs all the colors of the visible spectrum and reflects none. Joy is a feeling of great pleasure or happiness. Black joy looks like me, like him or her or them. It knows no gender, just knows prosperity in spite of white supremacy. Black joy is a stone worthy of digging, of excavating, a coveted jewel to be held up to light, to sparkle, to dazzle. Black joy knows this poem is necessary, no matter what your judgment says. Because you can't tell me black joy won't break any scale you put it on. Shit. You can't tell me black joy ain't the scale itself. Black joy is contagious, so contagious, folks got caught appropriating, caught pinning black against black, or joy against joy, or Remy against Nikki, or Cardi against Nikki, or Ree against B, because healthy, wealthy black femmes just got too close to God, and they only want to see us black and joyous if they make us that way. But they cannot create black joy the same way they created race. They cannot dictate our blackness. They cannot dictate our happiness. And yes, it's true. Once you go black joy, you'll never go back. Ask the Kardashians, those black holes, make a staple of black joy. Remember, black and happy can be synonymous. So whenever you hear the word black, instead hear happy. Case in point. In February, it will always be known as Happy History Month. In 2016, we lost our first happy president, and yet a happy body is found slain. All the more reason to preserve this shield, this force field of fortune. No hot commodity to be bought or bootleg or Kylie lip kit, backshot, brainwash. Be your happiest when your mouth is open. Be your blackest when your mouth is open. Shout it at margin. Shout black, shout joy. You remember, white supremacy is a beast that feeds on attention. Be happier, be hungrier, starve it, leave it nothing but the bones. Thank you.
This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away. But y'all gave me a lot of joy tonight, and I'm so grateful for getting to share some space with you in this virtual world that we're in right now. Thank you so much for your poems. Roya, Ariana, I just am absolutely I feel so represented. It's so felt. I feel so felt. Is that like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just so, like, I mean, I've been like in the back, just like it does make me miss physical space, because I want you to be able to hear every time that and like, and I'm sure that the audience is doing the same thing. All of the moans, all of the hands up in the air, like all of the things that happen. But I'm also so grateful to just like hear just the purity of your own voice without that too. Like, there's so much in it. So I want to know, both of you have been giving a lot of readings like online this whole time, but have you reemerged into the world with people? Have you had live audiences? Like, how is that different for you?
You want to take that?
Sure, I can take that one. I haven't really been doing any in-person things. Ebony Stewart asked me to read a poem at her book launch here in Houston. And I was like, all right, Ebony asked me, so I got to do it. And I did it, and I dropped a poem that I've been doing since 2014. I was like, oh no, I can't believe I did. But just out of practice, it's a muscle, I mean, y'all know, y'all been doing this for forever and a half, carrying it in your body, that practice. I hadn't read a poem standing up so long, but I miss it all the time. What about you, Roy? Have you been doing anything in person?
Yes, I have. I have been in person as an educator, and I've been in person as a performer, and it is wild. Everyone has like different protocols, and there are so many spaces that I've entered where like I'm the only one wearing a mask and I'm consistent, and then there are other places where it's like I should go to the bathroom if I want to pull my mask down to drink my water. Like, it's so strict. So it's like just operating on this spectrum as well of like people who are just living life and people who are, taking precautions and such has been, especially in terms of like performing, people run up to you, they're extending their hands. I'm like, thank you so much. I appreciate, like, please take your hand out of my face. Thank you. Respectfully, like, and and I understand too that there's such a longing for that intimacy, and I'm privy to that. So it's like, I want to receive the love, but I don't want it to be physical. I do not want to exchange anything, in the physical form, and it's but it's also, I will say, much to Ariana's point, overwhelming sometimes as well. Talking to your that green light on your laptop is very different from talking to a room full of people who can talk back. So yeah, it's taken some reacclimation, but I am also learning a lot of new things. There were things I thought I was missing, and I'm not missing them. I love the internet. I was saying that before we went live. Like, being able to just be in my house and do this is not really. I have no complaints, actually. I don't have to Uber home after this.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times online, it's gotten a little bit easier to even be more emotionally vulnerable sometimes because I'm already like at the crib by myself. And so, like, I've cried on camera more during this time than I ever would like on stage in front of people. But I also say, Marianne, like my first time being like back in front of people, like I definitely dropped poems that I know in my sleep. You know what I mean? I was like looking up at the lights, like, well, you took my poem for what? Why lights? I thought that, like I was looking around like, who has it? Because I don't have it. So somebody brought it because it's not here with me. So that reacclimation and that process is very different. Also, but you're both like so actively engaged in so many different communities, right? You're both educators. You're both doing a lot of different things like in the world, be it in person or virtual. Like still both of you are like really, really active. I wonder if you'll talk a little bit about like you're just describing your relationship between your role as an educator and your writing life. Do you find that they like compete for time? Do they inform each other? Do they fight each other? Are they friends? Are they sidekicks? Like what's that relationship like for you?
Yeah, I can jump on this, and then I'm sure Roy, you have a ton to say about this as an in-person educator. So I'll say my little piece, and then I would love to hear what you have to offer. Um, yeah, Susie, I'm so glad you asked that because I feel like because I haven't been doing in-person reading, I also haven't been attending a lot of in-person things, and so how long has the pandemic been with us now? I really miss that. I mean, all of us, I feel like, came up in slam and like community based spoken word spaces where like everyone that I came up with was also, was facilitating the writing workshops where we were attending them together, like that kind of community educational art space was foundational to how I understand my own writing and performing practice, that I found it really hard to write since the pandemic started without that. So I've really been going back to teaching a lot of online workshops, like low cost online workshops, so I can remain engaged with people. There's just something I feel like about being in a spoken word style workshop, not an MFA style workshop where everyone brings in their poems and is like, let's pick them apart. Not that, but the actual, a generative workshop where people come in like, here's an idea, here's a poem, here's some prompt, let's write together at the same time, and then we will share what we have produced, and it will be this kind of thing that only happens once. Like the magic of that. Um, Something about that is what has always kept me coming back to poems. And so I'm finding that's one of the few ways I've been able to remain connected to that initial magic. Yeah. What about you, Roya?
Ooh, let me tell you, an uphill battle. I'm writing. I'm writing new things all the time. I'm trying to be more um, diligent about submitting, um, and I am finding now that within my workspace, the young people most specifically have needs that outgrow what we can do within our workshop space, and so I'm realizing that I need to take a step back, because I'm interested in not only developing, curriculum that centers harm reduction, but also in facilitating workshops that do the same. And so, trying to figure out how to build a program that incorporates social workers or at minimum the school psychologists so that I can actually be a teaching artist, and not have to hold and carry so much of what they're going through, because I don't want to put, their traumas on stage. And also, building lessons that are, centering joy and approaching any sort of topics that they sort of toss into the hat that they want us to address, but addressing those topics from a standpoint where they can form their own opinions as opposed to what has been fed to them by Instagram and YouTube, wherever else they're getting their news from. And so within my own writing space, in my own therapy space too, I'm finding that I have to do so much decompressing of that before I can get to what I actually want to be talking about in Roya Marsh's own life, in my own experiences of the world, because I'm like so enthralled with what it is that these young people are going through and what their needs are and how they're consistently not being met by the institutions that they're forced to enter. If they're not coming, they're getting calls home, but it's like when they're coming into this space, you're not really servicing them in the way that they need to be serviced, and then you just want us to produce art and have a showcase, and I can't write about other things in the world because I need to write letters to the superintendents and I need to write letters to the chancellor, and and it's like I'm not focusing and missing deadlines and things like that. But I say all that to say I'm working on getting back into a flow where I can just, especially as the summer's coming and different programs are ending, center myself in my own work and rebuild a practice for myself as a writer.
I am happy for you. And I hope that you get to yes, center yourself and your voice and your work, because the world needs that too. Your art matters and it's important. So keep making it, pretty please, with sugar on top. I also, I'm curious to to talk more. Ariana, you mentioned a little bit about kind of the workshop formats and different ways that they exist, right? I never really considered it until I was teaching in an MFA program that oh, this is how I learned to workshop, is from open mics, right? And you learn that line is hitting or it's not hitting by the way the audience responds, right? And so I know I get that laugh here or I get that or I get that uh-huh, and then I know this is working or it's not working. And I never considered that as workshopping, but that way that we navigate those things. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of some of your processes around the ways that you revise work, and how do you approach it from a community perspective? Or do you work solo and kind of that's like a shark, or do you work with other people to kind of create your collections to decide what's working, what's not working? How do you approach revision? And does the community get involved? Is
Yeah, yes. Yes. I was just talking to a friend yesterday about this thought crossing my mind to go to the New Eurekan to perform this poem that I was writing. I'm like, why would I want to subject myself to that? But he's like, honestly, those are the best editors that are out there. And I'm like, yo, you are so right. So 100%, yes, the community gets involved in the after effect. And immediately I'll look it over myself. I think I'll do maybe 2 or 3 forms of the same poem before I'm sort of settled. And I'll send it to 4 trusted confidants after I gauge their capacity to read. And then after that, I'll read it somewhere. I'll try it at one public reading, see what people say, see what lines people are plucking out. Because sometimes I'm putting weight on certain lines and people are they're not listening to any of that. They're pulling out lines that I'm not putting any weight on, and I'm like, oh, all right, let me focus more on these, right? So absolutely, the community, I would say, is especially when my work is centering a specific community, Black and brown folks, marginalized folks, queer folks, I'm always looking for how they're going to respond, and also to be fact checked, to be checked in general. I want all of that.
That instant accountability, right?
For sure. I feel all of that 100%. And I think I want to add to, I think often something that I've been trying to do a lot in my more recent work is to challenge an audience. And so sometimes when I'm performing in front of them, I'm not necessarily looking for those moments of affirmation, but I'm trying to see how does the poem feel in my body as I'm sharing it with others. So sometimes it's not for me about how others are reacting to it, but do I feel when I'm saying it aloud in front of others? Okay, is this too many syllables? Did I elaborate too much on this line? This needs to be shorter, or you know what I mean? Figuring out the rhythm and the pacing, that's hard for me to do when I'm just by myself at my house. I can't hear the poem right until I do it in front of others. I was talking to a friend the other day and I realized I prefer to hear poems than to read them on a page. There's just something about the way that I process the work. Reading it on a page, it might take me like 5 times before I really get it, but I just have to hear the poem once and then I'll know immediately how it makes me feel and if I'm going to come back to it and what my relationship to it is and all of those things. There's so much more, I don't know, just texture to it. Yeah, that's the period. That's the end of my thought.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue because Setu Shango wants to know what the process is like for poems that are on stage versus poems that you want to leave on the page. Is there a difference to them? Do you like how do you decide? Are they different? Which is which? What's that process?
I can speak a little to this because I think about this a lot. A lot of the poems that are in We Are Owed are things I would not slam with. But I think for me, poems that I want to take on a stage are one, poems that I feel comfortable physically saying aloud to others. So there may be poems that I write that I feel comfortable enough publishing them or putting them out, publicly in some other way, but they are too hard or too emotionally difficult for me to give voice to. And so that's a thing that I wouldn't put on a stage. So I think things that I put on stage are things I feel comfortable with other people knowing about myself. And also I feel comfortable and good performing them. Like I get something out of the performance. I feel present, or it doesn't have to necessarily be that I feel good, but that I feel I am able to take care of myself after sharing with others. Poems that I want to leave on the page. I'm thinking about this question as like, also, what are poems that are just for yourself? Sometimes you write things and they're important to write, but they're not for everybody. They're maybe for your friends or for your partner or for your mama, but they're not for the world. And so I'm thinking about that too. There's also, I try really hard not to draw like a clear line between this is a poem for the stage and this is a poem for the page, but to think of both of those as a kind of form, right? If you're going to perform a poem on stage, and the people you're performing it for cannot see the text, they can't go back and reread certain lines, then you might be interested in trying to write a poem that someone can understand the first time they hear it. Whereas if you're writing a poem that people are going to see on a page, they can go back and reread and look up things, then you have a little bit more space to tease out an idea, to be a little bit vaguer, or to be a little more experimental in particular ways. And you can also play around with how the poem looks on the page, right? That's an element of the form that you can utilize to help the poem meet its goal. There are things you can do on the stage as well. So I try to think of them not as one or the other, or this kind is better than the other, but both have different possibilities. And the poem that you're writing, if you listen deeply enough to it, it will tell you which form it wants to be written in.
Thank you, Professor Brown. That's it. I will say there's one that I also appreciate, like it's perfect.
Can you hear us, Susie? Oh, no.
That's Mercury in retrograde right now, because Susie was about to give us some answers. You already know.
We were about to get teased.
We
Susie, come back. Oh my gosh. It's like they froze the great and powerful odds. Susie, get back here.
My first thought was, is this God? What's happening?
Right. Like, what? Susie.
Can y'all hear me? Let me know when you can
Oh,
hear
you
me.
back. Yes, we can hear
We can hear
you.
you.
Okay. So I'm in a small mountain town at a festival, a writing festival, and sometimes small mountain towns have internet that asks questions. And so, and I was just praising the virtual form. What I was saying is that the contrapuntal, right? Because you can show it on the screen and read it at the same time. So you can show it people what it looks like in the columns and you can read it to them, which like is hard to do live. And also like on the page, sometimes people don't know how to read it. So I love it for that. But I see that's exactly what you mean. Like, there just really depends on what the poem is trying to do. So yes. Roy, how about you? What do you feel about like how how do you decide whether it's like going to live in a book or live on a page or both?
Yeah, at this current juncture, I'm trying to operate in a space of both. Much of what Ariana said, I'm aligned with in terms of not trying to force that distinction. When I'm writing, I am creating um, two or three forms so that I can have some that I can take into schools, depending on content. That I can have some that I can lay on, general audiences. But in my writing style, I'm trying, to even experiment with form and spacing so that I can have things translate, because I think more about the opposite, right? I think so much more about when people experience me live and then they take that work home and how they don't have my voice, right? And so I'm trying to, manipulate the words and things on the page so that it's carrying as much of me as possible. But I don't necessarily make a distinction. But in terms of slam, for the most part, I'm a lot more liberated now. So some of my poems are either like longer or short. Like it's like I'm just saying what I need to say and I'm running away, or I'm talking for 4 minutes. Like you get in what you get, And I'm not, challenging myself to tell an entire narrative in 2 minutes and 47 seconds and also have the audience care, right? So it's like, liberating myself from the idea that my poem has to live anywhere other than, wherever it finds its own home. Sometimes that's just where I've written it. Sometimes that's in a periodical somewhere. But if it exists and I believe that it should be shared, it's going on pages and stages and everywhere, walls, bricks.
Yes. All the places. I love that for both of you. And I love that you have these books in the world. I want to know a little bit more about, if you talk about like the story of your first collections. You both have had your debut full lengths. And also both of you came up through slam traditions. So like, do you feel like slam prepared you for rejection? Did you experience any rejection along the path of publishing that first collection? Or did the publisher come knock on your door and say, hey, like, let me get that book? Like, what was the story of like how that book came to be?
I don't feel like anything in the world prepares you for rejection. I feel like rejection feels brand new every time. Rejection is like the winter in New York City. Rejection is like, oh shit, it's cold. It's December. It's supposed to be cold. Why are you shocked by this? But yeah. But I will say in the, publishing process, before my book actually came out, I was probably published like 4 places. Now I'm published 525,600 places, right? And for me, as someone who came up in slam, I then recognized that I gained notoriety due to my success in that space, but it was my face and my voice. So folks who don't know that venue, or who don't, some people's favorite authors, like for their entire lives, they have no idea what they look like. They could see Judy Blume, in the 90s walking down the street and would have no idea that that was Judy Blume, but they're like, oh, she's just my favorite, So it's like when I was entering this space, I had to literally let go of any ego or notion of like the world knowing me, besides that small community that knew. I mean, the slam community is definitely expansive, but I feel like you know who you know, and there are so many people that you don't know, but you might know of, right? Simple Ariana and myself meeting tonight, right? So when I was, thinking about promotion and all that stuff that came after, I was like, this is a cakewalk, because beforehand I had no idea that even having a book was like a possibility for me. I didn't consider it to be something I was looking for, but I was in another MFA program and I was going through so many things. I was like, something has to come from this. So I went on Facebook and I typed in my status, who finna publish my manuscript? And a bunch of people commented, people who I know have small presses, like people who I know have, been published. They're like, oh man, can't wait for this, want to see it. But nobody was like, yeah. This one dude who I had met in passing through a dear friend of mine who I went to undergrad with was like, send it to me and I'll see what I could do. I don't know this guy from a hole in the wall, but I'm like, okay. So I sent him a PDF. Like 2 weeks later, he hits me back and he's like, I sent it to this person and this person, but I also sent it to my supervisor. And, the senior editor's reading it and they're like, why would we give this to someone else? We should publish this. Turns out this guy works at Macmillan Publishing. I had no idea what, the vibe was when he commented on my Facebook status. I just was shooting shots. And then, he's like, we want to get it going. And I'm like, oh, this is remarkable. But now I have, so much reading, so much like investigating to do about the publishing house, about publishing in general, because I, again, did not see this for myself. But I'm always extremely ambitious. But I say all that to say it was very unconventional, but you also never know, who's in your network.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking questions and shooting shots is really something that I am all about. And I suggest, when it comes to your art and you wanting to actually share it, you far and wide,
I love that story, and so does Asetu. Also, Coco June used to do Judy Blume's hair on the Upper East Side. She lives in Florida and has a place in New York. She is so tiny and mild mannered. Judy Blume is such a gracious woman. Thank you for sharing that with us, because I love knowing that she's sweet and wonderful. Ariana, how about you? What was the story of your collection? Did someone come to your house and say, "Will you write me this book of poems," or how'd it go?
Don't we all wish it would happen like that? Just someone shows up with like a big fat check and is like,
Yeah.
I will trade you this for whatever you have.
Yeah.
Maybe in the next life. In this one, however, no, I'm thinking about the first part of your question, Susie, which was like, did slam prepare you for rejection? I think slam like prepared me for, I think, like the politics of slam and all the behind the scenes stuff that only the poets know about that happened, the messiness of it. I think that prepared me for the messiness and the politics of the publishing industry, so that I wasn't shocked when I started doing my research about where certain presses get their funding from.
Mm.
Um, We Are Owed took me 6 years to write because there's a lot of research involved in it, and I also just wanted to take my time with it. One of my old coaches, Sam Sachs, used to say, "You have the rest of your life to write your first book." And so it just took the pressure off of me. I was like, all right, I'm gonna take my time because I wanted it to be right. I didn't want it to feel rushed. So when it was finally ready, I had done all of this research into like radical Black acts of liberation. I had been sitting deeply with Gaspar Yanga's story in colonial Mexico, and I was thinking about those moments when you've been to a slam or to a reading or an open mic and people are reading poems about things that are in the news, but those people are not off stage doing that same work. They're just getting on stage and saying it. They're not living that life off stage. And so I was thinking to myself, I spent all of this time with the history in this book, and I was very careful to make sure that my politics were clear in the book. Now, how do I look then going to one of the big five publishers who I know is funded by blood money? You know what I mean? Like looking into, I found out recently about the Amazon Literary Partnership, that so many presses and journals and retreats, a lot of them, for marginalized people, take Amazon money. And I thought to myself, I don't think that there's a lot of ethical ways to publish, just period. I'm gonna just come out and say that. But I didn't feel right in my spirit with this collection, with this being my first thing. Once I learned certain things, I was like, that don't sit right with me. I can't make that decision and then look people in the face and tell them these stories that are in this book. And so I waited for a little while and I found this little tiny publisher out of Cleveland. That's two people, former labor organizers. The press is called Grieveland, and they because they are clear in their politics, they also pay the highest royalty rate that I saw of any press. Because that was the other thing that blew me, right? Like coming from Slam, like I have handmade, hand stapled, hand designed 7 chapbooks in my time, okay, at least. And I am used to, I know I pay for the paper, I pay for the staples, I pay for the ink. When I put it in your hand, you pay me. I don't split that with nobody else. And so that blew me to find out that I could spend 6 years of my life working on this book and you pay me 15%. Like, you gotta be playing with me. That can't be accurate. That's gotta be wrong. So I was like, I also can't accept that. That's just not, that don't sit right with my spirit either. So Grieveland, at the time I signed my contract, they paid I want to say 75% royalties to the author after like production costs for the print book, and then for the ebook version it was 90% royalties. I've never heard of any press doing that. Honestly, I'm not sure how they're able to do that. I'm like, are y'all making enough? Like, do you need to take a little bit more? You can take a little bit more if you need to. But it was just about, for me, trying to find someone whose politics aligned with my own and that were very clear about it. They weren't just giving it lip service. They weren't just like, oh, we believe in diversity. You know, a lot of people do. Like, prove it. That's how I felt.
That's a beautiful story, and thank you for getting into it, because a lot of what I want to talk about, like with these margins conversations with the conference, is really demystifying the whole process of bookmaking, right? Because like we just don't get taught these things in so many ways, and when we do, it's like very especially as marginalized folks, like we find out in these hostile ways and these talented kind of ways, and it's not cute. It's like very so being able to just like really be candid. And also, like, did you ever experience, who was experienced rejection for any of your poems? Yeah, has that ever happened to you? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
So for those of you watching at home, just know it happens to all of us. Happens to all of us. And also, you heard their poems tonight, right? People have said no to them. So like, it's okay. You're in good company. You know what I mean? Like, it's what it is. You're in wonderful company. And let the right publisher find you, let the right audience find you, let the right voices find you, let the right words find you. And on that note, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you so much, Roya. Thank you so much, Ariana. Please follow them on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. Hit their websites. The links are in the comments. Buy their books. Buy their books as presents for other people. Start book clubs where you are, right? This is how we do things in the world. This is how we create joy. This is how we create community. This is how we create connection. Like, buy these books for your friends, right? They make wonderful gifts for like just your average Tuesday, you know what I mean? And then like get into it and then talk about the poems, right? Because like this takes a lot of work to create these books, to write these poems, to feel these feelings, to think these thoughts, right? And also, they're not alone in them, right? And you're not alone in yours. And so being able to like gather, you know, to touch and agree, to forsake not the gathering of ourselves in whatever capacity we do, just like this, and be in community, is how we change the world a little bit, a tiny bit every day. So thank you all for being here tonight, and be sure to follow and support these poets with everything you can. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.